Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting. I am calling to order the meeting of the City of Salem Budget Committee for May 4th, 2022. Would the recorder please call the roll?
Yes.
Thank you.
Member Tigan, absent. Member Tom Anderson,
Present.
Member Schrock is absent. Member Phillips,
Here.
thank you. Member Leung, absent. Member Cohen,
Present.
thank you. Member Gonzalez, thank you. Vice Chair Brown, I see you.
Oh,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you. Sorry. Yes.
worries.
Member Hoy will be joining us at 6:45. Member William Anderson.
You're on mute, William.
I see you. Thank you.
Sorry, here.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Member Nordyke.
Here.
Member Source.
Present.
Member Varney.
Here.
Member Milton.
Here.
Member Bennett.
Here.
Thank you. And Member Vieira Brandel.
Present.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's see here. Member Nordyke, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'd be happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. All right, it looks like we have a couple of additions to add to the agenda, some testimony and also some staff reports. Could I have a motion to approve the additions to the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Second by
Second.
Phillips. Thank you so much. All right, is there any discussion at all tonight? All right, please signify, let's see here. Please say aye. If you,
Aye.
Lord,
Aye.
can't say it.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. There's always those jitters as you get into the groove of a meeting. So I apologize and thank you for your grace. Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion passes. Thank you so much. Tonight we have a couple of people signed up for public comment. The members of the public have signed to testify. Please provide your name and neighborhood or ward. You will have 3 minutes to testify before the committee. And our first person to speak tonight is Lynn Takata.
I'm hoping I can share and figure this out. Oh my goodness, this is such a challenge. Well, goodness, I had trouble with this last time. I don't know why I can't share this screen now.
Well, we've lost you as well.
Oh, okay. Well, let me sign out and sign.
Oh, it looks like it was starting.
Okay, I apologize. I don't know why the screen share is not working, but I will try once again. I apologize that I have not been able to figure out how to do this. So terrible.
Okay.
Anyway, I spent a couple hours putting together a PowerPoint for this meeting tonight, and it really said more than I can say in words. But I'm here to advocate on behalf of the Salem Police Department to have an additional 1/2 position for the graffiti abatement team. And the graffiti abatement team has done an amazing job. We've been really lucky in Salem that we were able to, get our graffiti removed, in a very expeditious way. I'm still trying to share my screen and I don't know that I can do it. I guess I can't. Anyway, recently we had a number of different incidents in Englewood Park where we had probably 50 linear feet of graffiti. The graffiti has preceded several shootings in the park by 1 week. So it's definitely kind of the writing on the wall in terms of being able to predict some violence. And at this point, our graffiti abatement team is understaffed and can't manage all of the graffiti that's happening in the city. So I spoke with Jennifer Hinkston with the Salem Police Department, and that's what she's requesting. If the city is not able to include this in the budget, a half-time position, I would suggest that possibly seasonal workers during the summer would be very helpful. We had graffiti that I'd rather not, it was racist, homophobic, and anti-Semitic. And so our counselor, Virginia, had to pull some strings to get the police chief to remove it immediately, just as a matter of protecting the children from Englewood Elementary School from seeing it. So I'm hoping that the committee can consider adding this. I had some amazing pictures of Portland graffiti, and that was my close to say, we don't want to turn into Portland. Salem's done a great job in the past, but we need help. And it's not just a matter of aesthetics, it's a matter of safety. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I was there that day, the most recent one, when you and I both encountered the graffiti at Englewood Park. That was really quite breathtaking in its breadth and width of coverage. So I understand the need there. Member Milton.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, not realizing that Salem is a very specific city within the state of Oregon that has the graffiti crew. I wasn't aware of it, but the organization that I work for, I was like, well, why don't you just call the city? Because we had some paint around the city in another city. And they're like, the city of Salem's like one of the very few that has this, which was super nice because we got tagged on our building. And within hours, the city of Salem was out there, removed the graffiti. And it does, it gets rid of that tarnished feel parts of the city where if you leave it up, it kind of makes people want to avoid that part of the city. So it speaks in numbers to the fact that we have a graffiti crew, but I feel like we should support that tremendously just based on, the facts that other cities don't, and we see kind of the outcome when graffiti's left up for days.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to give a little shout out to the chief. Of course, he would pick up my call and any of the other members, the council members' calls, and just the quick response and the sensitivities to Englewood Park and the history there. I really appreciate the Salem PD and their responsiveness. Thank you so much, Lynn, for bringing this topic forward for us.
Thank you.
Our next person up to testify is Michael Friedus. Michael, are you here?
Yes, I am.
We can hear you, and there you are.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and Budget Committee members. I'm Michael Friedus. I'm the West Salem Neighborhood Association Chairperson, and I'm speaking tonight in reference to the upcoming budget proposal. I first want to thank Paul Teagan for attending a meeting with the West Salem Neighborhood Association Executive Board regarding the budget. It was very well appreciated that he attended this and fit that in through baseball. West Salem Neighborhood Association's first concern is for our library. This is a very important priority for the West Salem community, and we request that this committee find the funds required to increase the hours of operation and fully staff this location. It's a gem out here, and we really want to use it. We appreciate being offered the chance to comment on the city's proposed sidewalk and ADA repairs and street maintenance work. We have offered some minor additions to address other sidewalks and ramps in West Salem. We recognize that the funding for these repairs is limited, and as you know, we are interested in advancing other transportation improvements in West Salem. most notably to eliminate gaps in the sidewalk system and to improve pedestrian safety and connectivity. The West Salem Neighborhood Association has created a list with both written and photographic examples of our areas of concern, which I will be forwarding to Councilors Stapleton and Varney and ask them to forward on to the rest of you so that you can see these firsthand for yourself. We will also be discussing the budget in our next general meeting, which is next week. And if any other concerns or questions arise for this meeting, I will be in contact again, letting you know what the rest of the community has shared. I want to take this time for thanking you. I want to thank you for taking this time listening to me. I appreciate all the hard work you do and the challenges you have to try to get a budget that works. And if I can be of any help in any way, please feel free to reach out to us out here in West Salem. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Michael. Are there any questions? Yes, Member Nordyke.
Thank you so much. I have not visited the West Salem branch, so I'd appreciate the opportunity for you to educate me a little bit more. What are the things that, if we had full access, we had full service of the West Salem branch, how would that look differently? And I don't mean just more hours, which would be the obvious thing, but are we talking about children's story time? Are we talking about adult learning? Are we talking about workshops? I mean, what is your sense of what the West Salem Library is like when it is fully operational?
So I'll tell you this, that I've unfortunately, since I've been in the area, and I've only been in Salem since 2019. So trying to understand it, I have not been in the library because of COVID and other issues. We couldn't get into there. But in talking to other people, I believe it's the thing is we want to open this up. I mean, for children to have the ability to go in and use the library for what's there, I think that's a big opportunity. I also see it as an opportunity for people who are out of their luck that want to try to fill out job applications to using computers that should be in the library to fill out applications, check for job things, having that tool there to use them. And then I also believe that there's some meeting rooms that can be taken advantage of from people that different groups out here in West Salem are trying to always find locations to have short meetings, discuss other issues. So there's that just community outreach and to use it. My understanding, it's a really nice library. I'm looking forward to getting over there to actually see it and talk to individuals. And I apologize for not knowing more about it, but that's what I think can come from it. I'm sure that you could talk to fellow Councilor Varney. I think she probably knows a lot more about it than I do. And again, I apologize. I'm sorry.
No, that's great, Michael. Thanks. Yeah, it is a wonderful space. I have enjoyed it every time I've been over, and hopefully we can, maybe I'll take a tour out there, Vanessa, you and I'd love to do that with you.
I don't know, are we in any jeopardy with the property there from the purchase from the new owner?
Yeah,
the mayor's raised.
Yeah, that was a question that was asked in a couple of meetings ago, and I'm not sure. City Manager Rutherford, do you have any information on that? I'm not sure if I saw that in any of our notes. Oh, I see Norm.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and chime in here. Norman Wright, Community Development. We have reached out and talked with the new owners, and yeah, there are no issues. We look forward to having a long continued relationship with Roths and the use of that property.
Great news to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Norm. All right. Oh, it looks like Member Source. Question?
Well, I just wanted to thank, the chair from West Salem Neighborhood Association for taking the time out to come tonight and to advocate for West Salem. Appreciate all you do. And I echo everything you said about the West Salem Library. If we can get that open again and get some of those services that are offered at South Salem for folks over in West Salem, I think it will do a world of good to helping West Salemites feel more connected to our city and our community. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Great. Oh, Member Milton, you have your hand up. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do. Do we know what the pre-pandemic attendance was, and if budget was able to happen, what so they were open full time, what attendance would be like? in the future? I don't know how to really position that question.
I don't know that answer off the top of my head, but I'd be glad to go do some research and bother staff at the city to try to help me get that information. I'm pretty good at trying to find it.
Thank you, Michael. Does any staff member have any kind of answer to that question?
Yes, Madam Chair, Norman Wright again. So as far as attendance, I don't really have firm numbers right now, but I just wanted to be clear that our concern with West Salem and its expanded hours has to do with staffing capacity. We have currently been advertising on-call staff positions that we're hoping to fill in the coming weeks, perhaps within the next 5 weeks. And as those on-call staff come on board, hopefully soon, we should be able to then have a full staffing complement that we can bring back to the West Salem Library with more hours than the 8 that we currently have today. So there's a roadmap that we're currently building, we have been building, but a lot of it is dependent almost entirely on getting full staff back at the library within the existing resources that we currently have.
And Norm, can I ask you a question about this? I've seen some stats from Mr. Shepke about the amount of volunteers that we have within the Salem Public Library kind of roster of folks who can help make this service a reality for our community. How do we stack up with that? Is there a way to increase, folks who are able to volunteer in this capacity? I know that there are professional librarians, and I am not one of those, but I would be willing to volunteer, in West Salem for 4 hours a month to do my part to help make this a reality. How do people get involved like that? And how are we set up to receive that kind of help?
We're not quite set up yet, but that's coming. I just so everyone can be aware, with both the buildings relocation and renovation and the pandemic that occurred, we did not refill vacancies as they naturally occurred over the last 2 years. And so we have been under a significant effort for quite some time now to get back to full staff. And that's the on-call positions, that's other positions too. That also includes the staffing capacity, not only for occupying West Salem, but also for bringing back a more robust volunteer coordinator position or function within the library itself. So, and also with the new hiring of our city librarian, Kim Carroll, there's just a lot of things that have been on the plate. But yes, there is certainly more that we can do, a lot of potential to be realized on the volunteer front. And I think there'll be more of that coming as well in the coming months. Certainly, that's a definite opportunity for us.
Great, thank you. And I know the West Salem Neighborhood Association is going to be a great resource for finding volunteers when the time comes. And Mike, I know that you'll keep me on the list of folks to contact, and I'd love to help out. It looks like Member Phillips, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair Stapleton. And I just got a question during the testimony that came up. I think this is new information that Community Development Director Norm Wright had mentioned, that we're currently at the limited hours due in part not to lack of funds, but due to lack of ability to expand staff. So my question becomes, let's say the budget is frozen because of our, we're understaffed in every single department. What does the staffing look like once we, potentially address the shortfall in staffing? Once we hire up to the ability we can, what's the hours look like in West Salem?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilor Phillips, and it's an open question that we're still trying to answer. But our goal is to get back to the full hours that we would see back in 2018 or 2019, whenever we had last been fully functioning in the space. And so that is our intent, and that is something that we were able to do with the hours and with the staff and with the budget that we had maintained at that point, which is unchanged today. So I don't see a reason why we can't be back to that full original set of hours that we had back again, I think 2019, but we're still developing that roadmap to get there. There's some operational needs today that didn't really exist back then that we're trying to address for the long term. So I can't firmly say and commit yet to that. I'm being a little dodgy there, and I apologize. But our intent is to be back to those full hours of 2019 for sure within the next few months. with current staff.
Thank you, Director Norm Wright. Just a follow-up. For those of us who, I have visited it previously with my kids. It's a beautiful place just before the pandemic hit us. But roughly what were those hours? I mean, you don't have to answer now if you can just include it in an email communication after today if you don't have it, but just so we have a sense. Because what I'm hearing is there's 2 days a week where we get a total of 4 hours each day. So what does it look like once we get the staffing just in numbers?
Mm-hmm. Certainly, we'll get that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Brown.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is for you also, Director Wright. I appreciate how you own your dodginess, so thank you for owning all of that. So is West Salem the only library that's struggling?
I'm not sure about the word struggle. I think it's more that they are on a prolonged reopening, whereas our main library has just really completed its full reopening over a 4-month span, or technically actually more of maybe a 6-month span. So we began reopening the main library branch back in November. And from November to actually, I think this week, we had been on a steady progression towards the full total hours that they currently have. And so that was a 6-month time frame. And I suspect that this could be not quite 6 months to get to the full operational capacity at West Salem, but it could be multiple months, certainly. Mm-hmm. But as far as total capacity and total operation, West Salem is now the only library of our 2 that is not at full hours original to 2019.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Anderson.
Thank you. We're looking to pass a maintenance bond in November of this year. Is there any relationship? I know there is discussion of a library in East Salem with the maintenance bond. Is there any discussion about the West Salem library potentially be affected when the city passes the bond?
There's currently no bond projects for the West Salem branch in the recommendation.
If only we could fund operations, right?
Right.
Thank you, everybody. If there is no more questions for Mike, thank you, Mike, for coming down and for sharing. It was really great. Staff, maybe Kelly, if you are here, I'm getting a text message from Councilor Leung, who's trying to log on. She's hoping somebody can text her the Zoom link. She must be out and about, but she'd like to join. So maybe staff could help with that. That's beyond my capacities to juggle. So thank you. All right, our next order of business on the agenda is approving the April 27th, 2022 Budget Committee minutes. May I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown.
Second.
Thank you, Member Phillips. All right, is there any discussion?
Yeah,
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Thank you, Member Anderson. All right, seeing no other discussion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? No? All right, seeing none, motion passes. Thank you so much. All right, it looks like we have, tonight we have 2 erratas before us to approve. Josh, will you walk us through both of these or are we gonna do them one at a time?
Let's see. I think I'll walk through them both together and you can do a motion for both. I know we have it listed separately, but you could do one.
Okay, sounds good.
As a reminder, an errata sheet is used to identify and correct any errors found in the budget or changes. Any changes to the budget document that are inaccurate or could cause confusion. For these erratas, the change impact budget book 1 for the Willamette Valley Communication Center and the Fleet Replacement Reserve. Errata 2 will add a transfer from WVCC fund to Willamette Valley Communication Center fund for the computer-aided dispatch system upgrade project. This multi-year project requires a transfer from the WVCC fund to the capital improvements fund each year. The expense was planned for and anticipated by staff, but was not included in the budget. The second error in the WVCC fund was the allocation of $500,000 in contingency assigned to the incorrect program. There's no budgetary impact to this change. It's just the display in the budget book. Errata 3 will make a budgetary display correction in the Fleet Reserve Fund and Equipment Replacement List. The approval of this errata will remove 4 duplicate police vehicles from the fiscal year 2023 replacement list and add 2 facility vehicles to the replacement list. There is no overall budgetary impact to this change. This just the display and the line item detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we are going to put these to a vote, hopefully each separately. So we will start with a motion to approve errata sheet 2. Do I have a motion from a member?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Phillips.
Second.
Second by Member William Anderson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Thank you so much. May I have a motion to approve errata sheet 3?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Second by Phillips. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. All right, motion passes. Thank you. All right, let's see here. Chief Financial Officer Eggleston, could you please review the information items in our handouts for this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 5 total information items for you this evening. The first is a summary of your actions, request for information, and testimony from the April 27th meeting last week. The second item is the third quarter report for the City of Salem financials, and the third item is the third quarter report for the Urban Renewal Agency. In your additions agenda, you also receive information regarding the deferred needs in the general fund for staffing. That's a request from back in January. And then you also have received answers to your questions that were posed through yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of information to get. I know Member Source and I were talking about that before the meeting. All right. Are there any questions for staff? Member Source.
So thank you, Chair. Josh, thank you, and team, thank you for doing this. There was one question I had asked, or at least I thought I asked, so I either asked out loud or it was in my head, and that was around SDCs and how it's laid out citywide on percentage based on how many SDCs in South Salem or West Salem go to, new development and of parks, et cetera, in South Salem or West Salem. And I didn't see that in here. So I was hoping maybe for next time that could get in there.
Yeah, I apologize about that. We'll get that in there for the next
Yeah,
one.
no problem. And I think it was when I was asking about parking. So it was like both of them, and you got the parking, and that was great. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's kind of amazing to me at the end of a meeting how many questions we've asked staff to follow up with. So thank you, staff, for all your dedication here. Next on the agenda for tonight, we will be conducting a public hearing on the proposed uses of state revenue sharing funds. The public hearing is now open. Josh, will you walk us through the hearing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There isn't a formal presentation, but this is a public hearing regarding the uses of state shared revenue. This report was included as part of your agenda. The state revenue sharing program allocates 14% of state liquor revenue to cities. In order to receive the funds, 2 public hearings are required. This one happening now at the Budget Committee, and then one which will happen at the City Council level in June. The proposed 2023 budget anticipates $2.4 million in state shared revenue. These funds are fully allocated to the general fund and have been recommended to offset the cost of police patrol services. This is consistent with how these funds have been historically budgeted and used. Thank you.
Great. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
We do not.
Okay, great. The public hearing is now closed. Is there any questions or discussion for the Budget Committee? Member Phillips.
Yeah, I might not be able to navigate to it quickly right now, but I have a question regarding the receipt of the shared revenues for the liquor licenses. Has that changed much since last year?
The revenue amount?
Yeah, like you said, currently this is like just over 2 million. Like, what was it last year?
Sure. Let me find that real quick. Last year, I'm being told it was 3.1 million.
So it's down substantially.
Sorry, typo, 2.1. It's up a little bit.
Oh, up a little bit. Okay. So it's up a little bit this year and it doesn't change that much. So it is pretty stable and it wouldn't change unless there was a major change in okay, I get it now. Thank you.
And just real quick, we did see quite an uptick to that state share revenue for liquor the past couple of years with the pandemic. So it is kind of rebased at a higher level.
Okay. I mean, I guess this is more of a comment now. I apologize. As someone who's interested in a sobering center, I'm always curious where we get our funds from. So I was just trying to get a sense of what this is.
Thank you. Member Source?
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question is, it seems based on the reading that traditionally this goes into kind of making up differences in patrolling of our streets, which obviously is important. Has there ever been any conversations about diverting some of these resources to maybe Salem's part of the sobering center or any other projects that are on the list of priorities of council?
Excellent question. I know there's been a couple discussions over the past few years, but just as a reminder, this is a general fund revenue. So in the general fund, it's kind of a zero-sum game. So if you were to move this revenue to something else, you'd have to have something to backfill that other revenue for police patrol.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, Member William Anderson.
So when you talk about that it goes towards police patrol services, does this assist us in funding any sworn officers, or is it just like extra overtime? What exactly would be the spending on enhanced patrol?
So the patrol expenditures are, I think in the realm of $20+ million for that specific program. So it covers a small portion of their patrol budget. It's not specific to overtime or any particular officers, just their budget as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Questions tonight? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion recommending the proposed use of state revenue sharing funds?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Member Anderson.
Second.
Thank you, Member Phillips. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, it looks like we are on to special orders of business. Chief Financial Officer Eggleston will now present 2 items to us, the good governance results area and the safe and healthy communities results area.
Thank you, Chair. I'll share my screen. The first results area is good governance, which includes the department's activities and supporting the public-facing programs provided by the cities. Those programs contained in other results areas. Good governance has an expenditure appropriation of $123.5 million, representing 17% of the total city budget. The results area begins on page 41 of the budget publication, and there are 211.62 full-time equivalent positions within the good governance programs. The proposed fiscal year 2023 budget includes a new HVAC technician in the facilities division of enterprise services that will work on the new navigation center systems. Enterprise services will also add a new senior human resource analyst who will work on public works recruiting and retention. And then just 4 positions will be moving from finance department to the enterprise services department's customer service center that's anticipated to open next year. These positions will join the 4 public works employees moving to the customer service center that were outlined last week. And finally, the risk fund and enterprise services will add 1 assistant city attorney that will work on employee and labor relations. The position will be housed in the legal department, and then also a part-time human resources assistant will be added in benefits and maintenance and enrollment, and that's in the benefits fund. The majority of the budget and good governance area is similar to prior years, but there's some notable continuing work into the fiscal year 2023. Over the past 3 years, the city organization has been shifting its management practice toward a one city enterprise approach to help achieve the goals and outcomes of the Salem strategic plan and improve the equity, effectiveness, and efficiency of city services. Some of the projects include a customer service center, shared services framework, a strategic plan update, and a review of the forecasting process. Included in the proposed budget is the second year of payments of a 10-year internal loan from the utility fund to complete several projects at the Civic Center campus. These projects include physical security enhancements as rendered on the picture on the slide. This is looking into the atrium next to the council chambers. Another project was the transformer replacement for the city hall and the library. This project was timely and coincided with the seismic upgrades at the library. And then also with the police department move to the new police station, there's funding included in that borrowing for the customer service center on the first floor at City Hall. If you're familiar with it, it's that corner kind of cafe space that's getting very empty these past few weeks. Staff are now available for questions on the good governance results area.
Hey, Member Tom Anderson.
Thank you very much. Josh, you're looking at the assistant city attorney full-time position. You said it was in employment issues. Does that include workers' compensation, or is that still going to be contracted out? I happen to have some experience in that area, and I know it's a very esoteric area, and I don't know if you're going to limit that to comp defense or to other, really have it on other employment issues.
I believe it's other employment issues, but I'll let Dan supply more information.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. Councilor Anderson, if you'd like to submit an application, we'd be happy to consider it. No, it wouldn't be workers' comp. The impetus for this is to allow legal staff to work primarily on employment investigations and risk-related investigations. Currently, we either use outside counsel for that or HR staff. This would allow us to have a more highly trained person to do it more efficiently.
Well, that's very good, City Attorney Atchison, because oftentimes you can do things cheaper in-house in the legal department. I'm not sure you can in the workers' comp area. And why would I want to apply for the job? I mean, I already get such a great salary as a city councilor. Why do I want any other salary?
You have a great boss, though.
Yes. It's always a funny conversation, isn't it, Tom? Anybody else have any questions? Member Phillips.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that this is the right section. I might have missed my opportunity, but I have, during the small group breakouts that they had with the counselors before our citizen budget committee, there was a discussion with staff that we're short-staffed in every department and that we have fewer staff at the city of Salem currently in 2022 than we had in 2007. So I find that deeply concerning, given that our population has increased by over 30,000 residents in that time. And I think it's having, a strain on the system. And the system is going to continually be strained at times with climate disruptions and other issues moving forward. So I want to make sure we're shoring up the most critical, roles in our city. I also know that our city used to have a deputy city manager, possibly an assistant city manager. Currently, we do not. So my question for staff is, do we need to reinitiate a role such as a deputy city manager or an assistant city manager, given, everything that we're probably going to go through in the next 5 to 10 years? I'm a little concerned that we don't have it.
I could speak to the first part just real quick. Just to clarify, the funding source for the position we're talking about is the risk fund. So it's a internal service fund, a little different than the general fund. So all the other city services pay into it also. So it's not a sole general fund burden. And as Dan mentioned, there very well could be some offsetting efficiencies to pay for the position.
Was that in regards to the attorney, or was that in regards to my question?
The attorney, sorry.
Okay, and then
Kristen Rutherford, interim city manager. I'll speak to the other part of your question. First, I want to clarify that the number of employees that you mentioned, those are employees in the general fund. So the city staff as a whole has grown, but that growth has occurred in utility funds and through other funding sources. But in the general fund, that your statement is correct. And then regarding the need for a deputy city manager or other positions, that's certainly something that was discussed a lot with Steve Powers when he was here, and where our needs are. We'd engaged Moss Adams to look at the organization in its entirety and to look at organizational alignment. There have been recommendations that were made, but the decision was, given the transition, to table any potential changes or creating new positions like this at this time until we do have a new city manager on board, so that they can contribute to that decision-making process or guide that so that it's in alignment of their view of how the organization should be organized. So it's, yes, there's a need, but yes, there are many needs, right? And so.
Yeah. Thank you. That's quite helpful. I mean, my follow-up question to highlight the point would be, what do most cities of the size of Salem have? Are we unique in not having it?
We are. Most have at least one. Several have 2 or 3. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Phillips. Yeah, that's a conversation that I think will also come up later tonight as well. But I think you asked at the right moment for the specific position that you're talking about. Are there any other questions under this results area? Okay. Chief Financial Officer, would you like to do the next results area?
I would. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
The next area is safe and healthy community. With the exception of the infrastructure results area we reviewed last week, the city dedicates the largest portion of available funding toward a safe and healthy community and can be found on page 93. The safe and healthy community result area is funded at just over 134 million. The result area provides various services that support a safe and healthy Salem community. The safe and healthy community has the most positions with a total of 554.77 within the result area's programs. For position changes, there are 7 new positions being proposed. In the fire department, there are 3 new firefighter medics being added in the proposed budget. These positions are offset to the reduction in budgeted overtime for the department. So if you're familiar with the police department, they have Kelly days and they need coverage for those days as well as vacation and other things. So in lieu of continuing to expend overtime, they're adding these 3 positions. Also, the Building and Safety Division and the Community Development Department is proposing to add 4 new positions to that division in the next fiscal year. These positions are reflective of the continuing growing permit volume and customer demand. In fiscal year 2022, the city entered into a 10-year lease agreement to acquire 1 ladder truck and 1 fire engine. This financing allowed the department to order the additional apparatus immediately, with the first payments due in fiscal year 2023. Anticipated in-service date for the equipment is early 2023. The additional apparatus will allow for continued emergency response capabilities in the event of a critical equipment failure. Currently, the department relies on a 30-year-old ladder truck to be placed in service when the ladder is out of service. And then also through the city's partnership with Marion and Polk counties and the Salem Police Department, they pair with specifically trained officers with qualified mental health professionals to help people experience a behavioral health crisis. During the fiscal year 2023, Polk County ended their intergovernmental agreement in March with the city and the financial contribution for this service. And then finally, beginning with fiscal year 2022, a new fund was created to segregate revenues from the photo red light and speed on green tickets. This fund, called the Traffic Safety Fund, supports a position in municipal court finance along with the reserve officers. In the current fiscal year, this program is being returned to the general fund and will be tracked using projects and unique account codes. Just a little bit of an administrative efficiency there. And with that, staff are now available for questions on the safe and healthy community results area.
Sorry, we had a bunch of motorcycles going by. Mayor Bennett.
Thank you. Yeah, I find this area probably the most troubling of everything we'll look at this year and we've looked at in the past. I think we desperately need to get serious about law enforcement, particularly traffic enforcement in the community. I know there's a real desire to kind of try other modes that people like to believe there's a theoretical reduction in the kind of traffic accidents and deaths and injuries that we're seeing. But there's nothing quite like a cop on the street that issues a ticket. And I think our traffic division, I think if I remember the chief correctly, and he certainly, I hope he's here to correct me, but has a really short number of officers on the street doing traffic. We've had enough shootings in our neighborhood, Virginia, to be very concerned about crime in parts of the city. It seems to have some citywide implications. I really believe we ought to be, maybe not in this budget, but I hope the council will seriously look at expanding the police force. The other is the fire department. We went through a period of reductions. It's when our library became smaller, our West Salem library had fewer hours. There were a whole batch of things that went on over the years. And one of the things we did was make serious cuts, I think, in the fire services force. We cut a person off a ladder, each ladder truck. We're down to, I think, 3. I think we need 4 just for the safety of the folks that work in that area. I think it's a terrible mistake to leave them understaffed. We desperately, I think, need to get serious about 2 additional fire stations. We've got them at least mentioned in the bond measure, but we don't have any kind of operating revenue plan for those. And I think it's in these emergency services that our folks really count on the city for its services. It isn't. There's a lot of areas that are fun to do, but this is the meat and potatoes of why people have city government and they have county government. And I think we're not meeting expectations and ought to get very, very serious about getting into the business of making sure we have the right police force balance with our community and the needs we have. I count on Womack to tell you what that would be. The fire department, I think Chief Niblock does a great job of telling us how bad the problem is. We do a terrible job of responding to that, saying we'll help you by getting more people onto the fire and EMT forces. We've got an aging population, which means we're going to have a great deal more calls on for health-related issues in our population. I think we're just sort of, I think we're really whistling through this thing without taking it as seriously as we have to. And I hope you all will take some time over the next few years to get very, very serious about this. It's a shortfall for this community that has real dire consequences for our residents.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if Chief is on the call, Chief Womack. I'm not sure if you have a response at all or if you're good.
I would just say I agree.
Thank you, Chief. Vice Chair Brown.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I have a question and I just need some clarity. So on page 102 in the big book, again, services and programs, it says that the Building and Safety Division will add 4 new staff members to meet the growing permit volumes. How large is that division currently? Who knows that?
It's a good question.
So if you look on the next page, 103, at the total staffing there, 31.77 is the total FTE proposed for the current year. And then you can see the prior year at 27.38. There's a little bit of other movement because they have some services in a different results area, but you can see the increase right there.
So Josh, right behind that, it only says like the two new positions include two plans examiners, a senior building inspector, and a new assistant building division manager. Is that something your office will oversee, or is that Krishna's office?
It's actually Norman Wright, Community Development.
Oh, got it. And the question I'm going to is, I'm always asking about our hiring practices and how we utilize an equity lens to make sure that we have a complete representation. Does Director Wright have that equity lens that he uses when it comes to hiring and filling those positions?
Hello, Dr. Brown. Yeah, Norman Wright again, Community Development. We work hand in hand with the Human Resources Department to make sure that our hiring practices, our selection, interview, and vetting process is fully aligned with what we practice as an organization. So our equity lens for CD would be the equity lens of the city as provided to us and as guided by our Human Resources Department.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And Krishna, did you have anything else to say about that?
No, I don't, but we also have our DEI coordinator, Kosti Evstatio, is here to answer any questions around that. But he is actually working with the HR staff and the departments to look at our recruitments, our postings, to make sure that we are giving that equity lens to our recruitment process. But he is available to answer any questions that you guys have.
Okay, and thank you very much, Krishna. I may have some more questions later on because the place where I'm trying to take us or just inquire more about is as we think about these positions that are becoming available, what partnerships are we building with, CBOs in the area, and also just the understanding of what an equity lens is and what an equity lens is not. Right? Meaning for some of us, that could be an uncomfortable conversation because as we think about equity is not interchangeably with the word race, right? And so we have to be willing to have those courageous conversations about race, meaning who's at the table and who is not at the table when it comes to our hiring practices. So I may have a couple more later on, so thank you.
Yeah, can I, if I may, I just want to make sure that I cover a couple of things. We did, the city did engage in a DEI strategy workshop recently. So we are actually closely looking into deeper into some of these recruitment concerns and also the recruitment through DEI lens. We also have a recruitment strategy workshop that we are going to be participating in a couple of months in July. So we are also going to go back into the DEI lens for our recruitment process in depth during that process. So I just want to make sure that I cover that. Thank you.
Great. And everybody who's watching, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Dr. Brown, you mentioned CDOs, and I actually don't know what that means. Could you share?
Those CDOs, I'm sorry, someone else was about to answer that.
No, I think I misspoke. I heard CDOs, but you're saying CBOs. Okay.
Yeah, B as in boy. That's my Southern Louisiana slang. It kind of kicks in occasionally, and then when it kicks in, nobody understands me, so.
Okay, and did we cover what CBOs stands for though?
Is it community-based organizations?
Organizations, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Community-based. I'm sorry. I thought we did answer that, but yeah, it's community-based organizations.
No, good. I'm trying to view the meetings from the outside and make sure that we're not talking in a slang that is foreign to some. And this one was, new to me too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Member Anderson.
Okay, I have one question for the fire chief, if he's here, and then a few questions for Chief Womack. Is the fire chief present? He's not on my screen.
He's here now.
Okay. Thank you so much. At last year's budget meeting, you had mentioned that there was an area in the city where the response time was pretty far from the hoped for 5-minute response time. And Mayor Bennett asked an interesting question. He said, if I was to have a heart attack someplace in the city, where would I not want to be? And you said Northeast Salem, which is like Ward 6. Has there been any progress to help reduce that response time? And how is the response time in various parts of the city now?
So the quick answer is no. In fact, it is worse than last year. Last year, we were able to meet our response time standard, which council sets for us, which is 5.5 minutes, 85% of the time during a critical emergency. That's our standard we try to meet. Last year, we met that standard 61.6% of the time. So we're a far stretch from 85%. The year before, we were at 65. So we dropped about 4% last year in 2021 over our ability to meet the standards. The northeast part of town and the southeast part of town, the Mill Creek area, and a lot of other areas in town have a longer response time. We ran over 30,000 calls for service last year. Very busy system, a 16.9% increase in our call volume. So you can't be two places at once, and we have multiple calls happening at the same time through the system. And so it's really a challenge. Just as a historical fact, in 2010, we had 43 people on duty. We have 43 people on duty today. Our call volume has gone up 80% since 2010. Our population's gone up almost 15%. So we are doing, serving more calls with the same people. So it's very challenging to be able to meet that response time standard. And what that translates to is if you're having a critical heart attack or the stroke, or you've been involved in a car wreck and you're bleeding to death, your time matters for you. So the sooner we get there, the faster we can treat you and get you to the hospital. If you're having a heart attack, your brain begins to die in 6 minutes without CPR or some kind of intervention, defibrillation. If it takes us 8 minutes to get there and nobody's doing CPR, and you're probably not going to the hospital. You're probably going to the morgue. And so, that's really a challenge for us. And we've, I think in 2017, I shared with the budget committee, we're going to cross over. Our call volume's going up significantly every year, and our ability to meet the standard is going down. And we'll probably go down another 5% next year. Right now we're 4% up over last year in call volume, so we're still increasing. So the picture isn't getting any better, and we have the same resources.
So following up on that, is there any money in the budget that would allow for the hiring of more firefighters? I believe that it was mentioned 3 to handle reducing overtime, but is there money in the budget available if you could find qualified firefighters to be able to assist with that?
So the 3 that are mentioned in the budget, it really is a budget adjustment. There are not, we don't have any more service trucks responding in the community. Those were just overtime positions that we filled with overtime last year, and now we're filling them with people, but we still have 43 people on duty every day. Yes, there are critical needs in the fire department to serve the community. If there were funds in the general fund to be able to support that, obviously that would be, I will not sit here and tell you we don't have needs, and that adding firefighters would help us have a better response time. Every engine you add to the system based on last year's numbers is about 4 or 5% increase in the ability to meet the standard. So you add 4 engines to last year, you're around 80% instead of 61%. So and an engine's about 2.2 million each. So that adds up pretty quickly.
Mayor Bennett mentioned that if I understood him correctly, that there were 2 fire stations hoped for. Will the November bond assist the fire department?
So the 2 stations that he mentioned, we have hopes to relocate Station 8, which is at Chemeketa, which is outside the city limits. It's the station we agreed to cooperate with the college probably 35 years ago. It would be better located inside the city limits, more to the north part of town, the northeast part where we're having trouble meeting our response times. And then southeast in the Mill Creek area is where we would locate Station 12. So there'd be 2 new stations. One of them would be a relocation. If we were able to construct those 2 stations, we would have to hire firefighters for Station 12, but we already have the firefighters from Station 8 that could move to the new station. So we'd be talking about $2.2 million a year in operating costs to be able to do that. Again, the general fund is stretched so tight that there isn't $2.2 million to be able to do that. But like I said, we haven't added a resource on the street since 2010. There's been an incredible amount of growth since then.
Thank you so much. Chief Womack? First of all, thank you so much for the thorough answers that you sent. I really appreciate that. One of your answers mentioned that a study found that the city needs 60 additional sworn officers, given the amount of growth and that we haven't had growth in the police force in over a decade. Now, you mentioned that I think we have 189 sworn officers now, but we have 193 that are authorized. Does that mean there's money in the budget to increase the force to 193 if we just find people qualified to do the job?
There's not any extra money in the budget. They are funded positions. So we authorized 193. That includes the 2 very recent additions for the homeless outreach team that's grant funded by the state. So we were at 191 just a couple months ago, but now we're up to 193. So we do carry a certain number of vacancies. We're carrying about a 5% vacancy rate right now, but there are a lot of challenges around recruiting and hiring police officers right now. So there's authorized positions, but there are some vacancies that we're actively working to fill. So we're not waiting on additional funds to fill those positions. We're actively trying to fill those positions continually.
The other question I had was a bit of a curiosity. I was watching the Salem Kaiser School District Budget Committee on YouTube last night, and they were talking about security officers at the schools. And of course, we used to have Salem police officers dedicated to that purpose. I don't know if you know of this information, but have you any information about if Salem Kaiser schools have had an increase in violence or a decrease in violence since Salem police officers were no longer there?
I don't have the stats ready on hand. We are beginning to kind of track some of that information in coordination with the school district. But it's been a little hard to tell because of the pandemic and the things that were going on too. It's kind of hard to compare apples to apples. We need to take a look at a full year without the school resource officers compared to a full year pre-pandemic to try to get a better idea. But yes, they've increased their private security staff after ending the contract with us for our school resource officers.
Okay, thank you so much. I've spent a lot of time on local social media, and both fire and police are just consistently, the people of Salem talk about their support for both departments and how much they really want the city to put more into the work that both of you do. So on behalf of at least the people that are on social media, thank you so much for everything you guys and your teams do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Source?
Stacy was actually before me.
Oh, sorry. Member Vieira Brando. There you go.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions and one statement I just wanted to follow up that conversation with. I would be cautious or caution everyone to look at the statistics for school behaviors and school violence and attribute that solely to the absence of SROs, considering the past few years that we've had and how traumatic it has been for our students and our families. I think we can't only attribute it to that. There's a lot of other stuff going on with our kiddos that makes them not okay and that has made them behave in certain ways. So just a statement on that. My question is for the fire chief. It's actually like a several part question, so I apologize. But thank you also for all the data that you sent over to us ahead of time. I'm a data person, so I love looking at that stuff and it helps me really to conceptualize what's going on. And looking at it, it looks like nearly 2/3, maybe a little over 2/3 of the calls that y'all respond to are medical emergencies, medical events. And I'm just curious, one, how the response in terms of who you send, what you send differs from our response to a call, a fire. And kind of in connection with that, what other strategies we're looking at to become more nimble and to become quicker at responding. Obviously, there's a lot of resources that would help with that. And in the interim, what are some other ideas that we're looking at to assist us in responding more quickly?
Absolutely. Great question. A common question that we get. So we have what I would call a tiered system, and we use triage protocols at the dispatch center to help us decide what we send to which call. So we don't send a fire truck and an ambulance to every medical call. We figure out what the right resource is to send. Sometimes that's a fire truck. Sometimes that's an ambulance by itself. But we're a blended system. So at peak, we have 10 ambulances in service from our third-party provider and 11 fire trucks and 2 ladder trucks. And every one of those vehicles has paramedics on it and paramedic equipment. So if you're having a heart attack and the fire truck gets to your house first, they have all of the gear and the trained people to immediately begin treating you, no matter which truck or vehicle gets there first. Obviously, you're going to be transported in an ambulance because we don't transport people in fire trucks, but that's the best way to get to the number of calls we have in our community. We have covering the dirt, if you will, a saturation of the right resource at the right time with the right people. So that's how we do it here. As far as advances in being able to be nimble, and the fire service has changed a lot over my 37 years. We are more medically focused now. We still have fires. We had 900 fire calls last year, so it's a very busy year for us for fires. But one of the things that we are looking at, we are getting a new computer-aided dispatch system. Should go live sometime in November, I think, of 23. And one of the things we're going to do differently is we have automatic vehicle locators, AVLs, on all of our vehicles. And just like you have in your smartphone, it can track where you're at on the road. The computer will be able to dispatch the closest unit to the call. Right now, we are dispatched by kind of map zones, and it might not be the closest unit to the call. So we are looking at technology and ways to change how we do business, so we can be as efficient and then effective as possible. We know the faster we get there in any emergency, the higher chance of survival the person has, lower property damage, the faster the occupant can get back in their homes. We have the chance to save their loved one's life. That's everything we do revolves around saving that life and conserving that property. So we're always really mindful of that and looking for ways to change our model, if you will, to try to be on that cutting edge. We are also looking at our partner and working with them to increase the number of ambulances in our system. We need some more ambulances in the system. We're just getting busier. And so finding that balance between those two, it is a public-private partnership, and we work together to best serve the community.
Thank you so much. And one point of clarification, so the statistics that you sent us, or that we see about response time, does that include then the ambulance response times also?
So that we measure ourselves with a 5.5-minute response on anything that's a priority 1 emergency. So that could be a house fire. And those are basically where somebody's life hangs in the balance, and it's important for us to get there in 5.5 minutes. So they are ambulance calls, heart attacks, strokes, any kind of major medical where somebody has a potential of dying. That's what we measure ourselves by. So we run 30,000 calls. We measure the timed response on about 13,500 last year, I think. So we don't count, if somebody has some ducks stuck in the sewer or they have the typical cat in the tree. We don't take emergency response times on those or broken ankles, because you're not going to die from a broken ankle. So we don't even run with lights and sirens onto that. There's no reason to jeopardize hurting somebody in traffic with a fire truck driving an emergency for a broken ankle. You're not going to die from a broken ankle. So yes, we do only time the ones that are the critical life-threatening emergencies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, Chief, one of my friends had a cat emergency, and you all helped, and they had nothing but really great words of praise for the Salem Fire Department and their help with that. How many cats and trees do you get a year? Is that kind of rare?
I'm almost sad I brought that up, because now we'll get more. And you've never seen a cat skeleton in a tree. So they do come down eventually. There's been several that we've helped with over the years. We typically, the way we respond to those is if we are available and there aren't other emergencies, we'll try to come out and do what we can. But sometimes the cats are quite a ways up, and it's, you're putting a human life in jeopardy to go get that cat. I know pets are important. But so, yeah, we don't have a lot of them. And we don't get a lot of the ducks in the sewer, but every year this time when the ducklings are out, they fall in the storm drains, and we go pull them out and grab them out, put them back with the mama ducks. So if we have time, we try to help out in the community like that.
Well, I appreciate it. I think those baby ducks are adorable. So thank you for that. Member Source.
Thank you so much. And I got a couple questions for the fire chief and a question for the police chief. So I'll start with the fire chief. Chief, thank you so much for all you do, and thank you for taking the time. You've given me a tour of the West Salem Fire House and a couple others, and I really appreciate that. My question is about call volume. You know, you're talking about 80% increase in call volume over the last 10 years, and I've looked, and we had about a 14% increase in population. So my question is, are people just way more comfortable in calling 911 than they used to be? Is it because we have a more vulnerable population than we used to have, or what explains the massive increase in call volume?
So I think it's a combination of all of those. I would also say that we do have people call who don't have a primary care physician, and they seek medical treatment through the ER. And so that happens. We do have an aging population in this country. And we've had a population increase. So anytime you have a population increase, you're going to have more traffic accidents, you're going to have more traumas, you're going to have all the things that we end up going to help people when they've had a tragic situation. So I think the combination of all those, it's not one specific thing. And I'm really hesitant to point to, hey, the senior citizens are causing this, or, the homeless or whatever. It's not any one thing. It's a combination of all the population, because we don't, we serve everybody. So you call us, we come, and we are seeing some 16.9% increase last year was the largest increase. The biggest one before that was like 9.9%. So that is an insane amount of increase in call volume. And like I said, we're on track for we're at 4%, I think, right now, and we're not even in the busy time of year yet. So by August, we'll have a better idea of what we're going to see this year, and I'll bet it's close to 10%, just looking at the numbers.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting that the lack of healthcare is causing more 911 calls instead of people, going to the hospital. They're calling the ambulance, which I guess makes sense. My second question for you is, as someone who's not a firefighter and not an expert on how fire engines work, can you explain to us the difference between a 4-person engine and a 3, and why 4 would be more beneficial for you all if that's the case?
So I think the mayor was talking about our ladder trucks, not our fire engines. So certainly a 4-person ladder crew is more efficient on the fire scene. We can break up into 2 crews of 2 when we go and do work. So we always work in a team. If you have 3, you can have a team of 3 or a team of 2, and 1 person stays outside. So 2 teams of 2 is more efficient. You can get more work done. Ladder truck crews, when they get to a fire incident or a rescue incident, they have some pretty heavy tasks to perform, either venting the roof, ventilating the building, setting up fans, disconnecting power, those kind of things. So being able to do those tasks quickly helps us get interior in the structure, put the fire out quicker. Same thing when we're rescuing people, in car wrecks, we have to do extrication to get all the tools out. More hands help us do it quickly and safer. We have operated with 3 people on the ladder truck for a considerable amount of time. I think since 2008 is when we, and basically what we do, we still have 4-person staffing, but we basically take that 4th person and use it to cover overtime. So we don't have to pay overtime. And so we take 2 people off the ladder trucks. There's 2 in service every day, and we run with 3 people. I came from a department that ran with 3 people and did it safely. It's better with 4. And I'll be on record as saying it's better with 4. Financially, we haven't been able to that's basically 6 more firefighters we need to have FTEs for to be able to do that. And then, the other question was really about the fire engines. NFPA 1710 recommends 4-person staffing at a minimum. On fire engines, we have always staffed with 3. Again, that comes back to, $1 a dollar challenge, you add a fourth person to every engine company, that's 11 more firefighters. That's 33 more firefighters you have to hire in your department to be able to staff that. Again, safety, more people on scene, more people to do the work. It is a safer method. It's just a challenge financially. And if I was be given more money, the first thing I would do is add more engine companies to the system before I talk about going to 4-person engine staffing. I don't know if that'll ever be a reality in Salem. I mean, I need 10 more engine companies to serve this community to meet the standard. And we're a long ways from that. So, a city this size should have 20 engine companies in service, and we have 11.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. And then my next question's for the police chief. And it's about, I've lost the page, but somewhere in this section of the budget, you talk about the 60 police officers, and you mentioned that basically the argument around cahoots could help maybe reduce the need for all 60, maybe not. But in here, there's a narrative about how you don't send police officers to every kind of call in that nature. And that's not the common belief in our community. So do you mind talking a little bit about how you decide to triage whether you send a police officer or you send the mental health, team where you have the mental health person and the police officer team to a scene, and how that's decided? That'd be really helpful for me.
Sure. Thank you, Member Source.
Thank you.
Trevor Womack, Chief of Police. So as the fire chief said, too, there's a triage process that goes through the dispatch center for the initial call, right? And a lot of times what we're looking at is the level of danger or emergency associated with the situation. So if you get a call of someone who may be appearing to be in crisis, emotional crisis, but there's no weapon involved, there's no obvious crime involved, perhaps they're just, roaming the street and yelling or something like that, we may not go to that call at all because there's really no crime or event for us to go to. We may try to send our mobile crisis team if they're on duty. They're not 24/7, 365, where we have an officer paired up with a qualified mental health professional. They may be able to go and try to provide some services. So those are the type of calls that we may not be going to anyway. I think there is an idea or a sense that we go to all of those type of calls, and we don't. And the reason we don't is because we're understaffed. And so when I make the case for additional staffing, it's to keep up with our core functions. And not having added staff for the past 10 years, and I've said this, sorry to keep using this term, but it's almost like death by 1,000 cuts. You continue to chip away at what you do as an organization because the population's growing, service demands are growing, and your staff is not increasing at all. And so you're retracting. And one quick example that comes to mind is we used to have a public relations unit here at the department that had a sergeant and 5 officers assigned to it. That doesn't exist anymore. I just took the last officer out of that unit and reassigned that position recently. So that's the kind of changes that have happened over a 10-year period where you've lost all of your community engagement, all of your community policing capacity so that you can meet your core function for emergency response. We also just went through reviewed all the calls that we respond to as an organization. There was a lot of this work that was done before I got here, so it's a very efficient and lean organization already. But we identified a few more calls that we could try to pull back on. For example, calls of simple noise complaints. If you call in and say, your neighbor's playing the noise too loud, we're not going to go to that anymore because we don't have the capacity to respond to that. We're going to refer that to an online report or some sort of mediation service. So we're continually looking at ways to pull back on the in-person response. So it's kind of a long-winded answer there, but the reason why I say having a non-law enforcement response model, this topic comes up often, could be a benefit, and we're trying to track those calls better. And so we just recently, you have to have data to make these decisions, and there's first of all, the definition of homeless or someone in crisis can mean a lot of different things. And so you have to try to define what you're counting and then find a way to track that. And so we recently started tracking our CAD calls as far as having the officers identify if somebody was in emotional crisis or if they're unsheltered. And it looks like from the first full month of data, it's only about 5% of the calls that we go to where the officers are dispatched where they're unsheltered. So it's not as big as you hear numbers about 15% or 20%, because homelessness means a lot of different things. It could mean somebody that just is couch surfing, right? That's a homeless person, or somebody in a shelter. Could be a homeless person, but unsheltered with the unmanaged encampments that you see, it appears that it's about 5% of our calls. And so not all of those would go to a cahoots type response either, right? Some portion of those might be handled by a non-law enforcement response. So trying to quantify the impact that it would have on the police department is difficult, but it's not as large as some folks may believe, because we don't go to a lot of things already. So again, I'm not, it's not that I don't support the program. I do think that there's basically three, on a continuum of response, I think there's three responses that are needed. I think we need some sort of non-law enforcement response. We need a co-response with law enforcement and a mental health professional like we already have. And then sometimes you're just going to have to send police alone because there's an armed individual or there's a threat to the public. The problem is how do you fund all three of those things without one coming at the expense of the other? And if you're understaffed as a police department with a need like 60 police officers, I just don't know how you staff an additional service that doesn't exist until you can at least make sure you're meeting your core functions. And so it's a very nuanced conversation. So again, it's not that I don't support that. It's just that it's about prioritizing your funding and your resources. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, Chair, if I can just follow up real quick.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Sorry if I came off saying that you don't support cahoots. That wasn't my intent of the question. I guess just to follow up, if there's any data that you can share with the budget committee around how many of those calls that folks come in around crisis that you're referring to non-police that you know of, or non-law enforcement response that you know of, just so that we can help with that narrative and say like, look, there are situations where the police are not responding and they're referring to more qualified folks to respond to those situations. And I think that might help with just a community understanding of what's actually going on there. So I think that would be super helpful if you're able to. Appreciate anything you can do.
Appreciate that. We are trying to get better at getting the right data to be able to quantify some of these things, but it's a challenge. And even traditionally, if you think about law enforcement, we're very good at counting criminal actions, right? Taking police reports and having crime data, but homelessness is not a crime. And so it's very difficult to track these things unless they're connected to a crime somehow. So there's a lot of issues around homelessness that just simply aren't tracked in the law enforcement world. So it is very challenging to quantify that service demand, so to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for bringing the word nuance to this conversation. We live in a society that's very black and white. And I think the more and more we can use terminology like nuance, the better off our communities will be, because everything here we've talked about tonight is all about nuance too. Mayor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask the Chief, Chief Niblock, if I may. Chief, what is the current kind of best practice or protocol around emergencies that may be coming in and being at least initially triaged as whether it's heart failure or some other fairly catastrophic event? How many people are you now having on that scene? I've seen it a couple different ways, and I just wondered how many EMTs, firefighters are showing up on those fairly dramatic calls. They're not just simple, Joe slipped and twisted his ankle. Joe slipped, it twisted his ankle, and he's not getting up and he's not breathing or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So great question. We tried earlier, I talked about sending the right number of people in the right time to have the best outcome. So when somebody's having a heart attack, it takes about 8 people to really run that call. And it's a code, a full-blown CPR code. 8 people to really run that and manage that call to have the best chance of survival for that patient. So we send 2 engine companies and a medic unit to those calls. That's 8 people. We do something called a mega code once in a while, and we do some of our citizens academies and things like that. And we actually have a practice where people can watch what's happening, and they're like a pile of ants working on this patient. Everybody knows their job, and they're just all working like crazy, and with the goal of getting that person, breathing again and getting a heartbeat back, so we can transport them to the hospital where they can get some more definitive care, whatever they need. Last year, we had a 60% save rate in our CPR activations, which is based on the national standard. And we saved 25 people, that went home to their families, went back to their jobs. And when I say save, I mean they left the hospital with no neurological deficits, back to their families, and they got whatever repair they needed at the hospital. We have a great relationship with the hospital, great docs over there. And we have a good outcome there. So that's one of our, we want to save lives. We can save more lives that way because more people have heart attacks than they have house fires. So we've really tried to sharpen our pencil, if you will. Now, if we get there and it's a 40-year-old male and he's having acid indigestion, well, guess what? That second engine goes back in service and takes the next call, and the medic may stay there and deal with him, and the other engine goes in service. So we peel off right away if we're not needed. But we've found our save rate has gone up by some of the technology we've put in place and having the right number of people there for a short period of time to save that life and then get them to the hospital and go on to the next call.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Member Nordijk?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on Member Source's questions and a couple of things that I encourage the committee to keep in mind in the future as well. When you take a look at the data from the mobile crisis units in Eugene and Portland, both have shown a reduction in police calls. But something else is important to keep in mind too. For years, the City of Salem Police Department did not, label calls as responding to a homeless person or not. And I think Chief Womack already touched on that. So we're going to have some limitations in the kind of data because we were never collecting it in the first place. And as the chief pointed out, how do you define homelessness, right? They don't wear badges. So I appreciate his understanding of that and sharing with this committee. But the other thing that I want to point out is that we should start tracking that data as accurately as we can now. But you have to understand that some calls for service that go to the Salem PD will be helpful to show what percentage of their calls involving persons experiencing crisis, welfare checks, persons experiencing homelessness. All of that would be great data. But it's important to note that in the testimony that we've received on this subject in the last year, when CAHOOTS funding came before this committee, we had businesses who said that I wouldn't call the police for certain types of calls. So there's a whole other category of data that cannot be collected from Salem Police or Salem Fire because people are looking for that third option of lower acuity mental health calls where someone appears to be lost or confused. And as the chief said, being homeless is not a crime. So there's this third category, as he mentioned, where there are people looking for a completely different type of response and a response in which they would never call the police in the first place. I think everyone I've talked to about this issue fully recognizes the need to fund police, the need to fund fire, the need to fund the right tool for the right job. But this third category on this continuum of public safety also is about addressing this third category of calls that so far have no one assigned to respond to. And when it comes to mental health issues, waiting until you get to crisis mode is dangerous for everyone involved. So there's a lot to be said for the prevention that comes from having a mobile crisis unit that is civilian based. So I would love to see more data from our department, but just keep in mind, there's a whole other category that we've never been able to track and won't be able to track just by analyzing 911 calls. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Knight. Member Phillips?
Thank you, Chair. I have probably questions and comments for both chiefs. I'd probably start with Chief Nyblock from Fire. First off, I too have had community members ask questions about like how many rigs or people are responding to various complaints. And I don't know about you, Chief Nyblock, but high quality CPR is exhausting. I don't know if you've found that to be true as well, but I don't know how many calories are burned with good chest compressions, but routinely it is, you can't do that for more than 4 or 5 minutes. So I'm pleased to hear that you've got at least 8 people going to a potential CPR. That's at least how many people we have in the room at the hospital. And you guys don't have the predictability that we have of the same lights, well lit, all the available tools. You guys are in unusual circumstances, unpredictable. So that makes perfect sense to me. I'll move on to my question though. My question would be, if we were to, wave a magic wand and get a couple extra $1 million that we currently don't have, what would be your first priorities to fund in terms of getting new FTEs? Like what do we need? Like what's the first 3 or 6 FTEs that you would utilize in the fire department at this time?
So to have an impact in the community, I need an engine company, and with relief and all the kind of things to fill those positions, that's 12 FTEs. And if given 12 FTEs, I'd put another engine in service. I could do that immediately. I would float them in the system until I got another station built, and I'd probably position them out southeast area where there's over 2,000 calls a year that are over 8-minute response time. So that's where I'd put them in the system. If you waved your magic wand and say, hey, you're getting another resource, that's how I would use it. There's more impact to the community by putting the engine in service than there is going to 4-person ladder staffing. To be quite honest about that, that would be a want as well. But the highest priority would be putting another resource on the street and covering some of the dirt we don't cover right now to help the community have better response times. And I'd like to follow up with your comment about high quality CPR is exhausting. You're absolutely right. And a year and a half ago, we purchased auto pulse units, which is a unit that does the CPR for you. And it'll do high quality CPR for 45 minutes without a break. And it doesn't get tired until you change the battery, and then it starts again. So we've seen an increase in our save rates because of that innovation that we invested in with the EMS fund into the community. And it's been, and it does help with the quality of the CPR when you're moving a patient, you're on a stretcher, you're coming down a flight of stairs, you're in a pig pen. We have a lot of different environments we operate, or taking somebody out of an attic. Once you have them on the backboard with that device on, their CPR is going the whole time. And as an ER doctor, that the importance of not stopping the CPR, you build that pressure up in the system and you circulate the oxygen in the blood that's already there. That's really helping us with our save rates.
Yeah, those are all great comments. I agree, absolutely. Uninterrupted. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Chief Nyblock. And my same question would be for Chief Womack. If you could wave a magic wand, and could get a few more FTEs, are you going to try to build towards that community model policing that you've been talking about for some time now?
Yes, that's the vision. That's where we're headed. But if I had to prioritize, I really appreciate this question, so thank you. If I had to prioritize, it would be the 6 positions that I need first and foremost to make a structural change within the organization. So the staffing analysis that I often refer to that came to the recommendation for the 60 to 80 police officers, it also included a recommendation regarding at the line level supervision rank. There's a current rank that we have now of corporal. And the recommendation is that we phase that rank out, and then we push line level supervision up to the sergeant level, and the work down to the officer level, and just remove that corporal rank, which means I need 6 more positions so that I can add a little bit more supervision capacity to make that change. And it's becoming more and more critical because since I arrived a year and a half ago, I stopped promoting those corporals, knowing that I'm trying to get to this point of phasing out corporals. And so just through attrition, just in the last year and a half, we've lost 6 or 7 of those positions. And so we've gone from about 18 corporals down to 11, I believe it is now. And that's going to continue to happen as people retire and leave the organization. And so it's becoming more and more of a pressure cooker for the supervision at the line level, the longer it takes to fill those positions. And so I feel like I'm in jeopardy of making that change unless I can get those 6 positions to kind of finally pull the trigger on that change. So if I had to prioritize, I would ask for the 6 positions so that I could add 6 sergeants and phase out that corporal rank for good.
Well, thank you for those comments. And I mean, I'm certainly convinced the tricky part is just finding the funds. And you know, we need, you know, those funds for police. We need the funds for fire. And we probably need some more funds in other parts of the departments as well. But thank you for sharing that. I think it helps the community understand what's coming next.
Thank you, Member Phillips. Hopefully, Chris Hoyt can get us funding, payment in lieu of taxes from the state there in your representative role. I'm hopeful for that. Maybe we can take care of some of these emergency personnel needs in the near future. Any other questions on this topic for tonight? Okay, we have one more here. Our final item tonight under special orders of business is the opportunity for the committee to continue an earlier discussion or introduce an issue or concern for the committee's consideration. I think this is also a good time to ask questions about the packet that we received. Any questions, concerns? Yes, Member Phillips.
Yeah, this might have fit in earlier, but there have been some questions in back and forth groups that I've participated in online regarding the funding of the body-worn cameras for police. And I guess my question is how much of that is funded by the grants from the state versus how much of that is like going to be part of our general fund operational costs?
I can address that. The initial year of staff funding was included, as well as the purchase of the equipment. So after that first year of funding, the burden's on the general fund.
Okay, and then do we have an estimate what that is this year or next year, like that cost for operating it yet?
Chief, do we know what that is?
Not the final answer on that. I will add to what you said, Josh, as far as we didn't fill those budgeted positions yet because it didn't make sense to hire the 4 positions until we had a program in place. So we're right now going through the process of hiring the 4 staff members that came along with that, and we're in the middle of selecting the actual vendor. We have 3 vendors that we're going through. We're evaluating the second vendor now. So we're looking at purchasing in the summer. And then we'll have a good idea of what the actual cost is. And then those personnel costs will start to hit the budget as well. But up until now, we haven't had those personnel costs hit the budget either. So it's kind of carrying the funding forward for another year, if you think of it that way.
Thank you.
Member Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. I just wondered if we could take the opportunity to maybe look at the general obligation bond that is up in November. A lot of the comments that citizens wrote in we're talking about, street repair and other kind of library issues. And so that'll be taken care of through the bond. And I think it's really important for everyone to message that the tax rate will not increase with this. I think that's a very important thing to message. The question that I would have is that a lot of these are one-time expenditures. And so I worry about the roll-up costs for after the 10-year investment period is over. And since we do not have magical wands to produce ongoing funding, I know it was a topic of conversation in previous meetings about different revenue sources in which we could look at. Has there been any more movement about different revenue sources, tax increases or whatever, that the city might need to explore for not only that cliff we once mentioned, 5 or so years off, but also just for some of these investments as we continue forward. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, I'm going to separate your question into two categories. One is capital and the other is operations. So on the capital side, we're looking to issue a bond, $300 million, basically authorized to issue that over the 10-year period. The ideal would be, year 8, 9, we do it again, right, for the following 10 years. So kind of begin that cycle of investment in the community and maintaining that level tax rate over the next 10 years. For the operational side, from the bond specifically, the steering committee made a point of using that ongoing operational costs as kind of a filter for some of the projects, especially in parks and other areas. There are a couple things that could have an operating cost. We talked about it already tonight with the fire station. So on the capital side, it doesn't really impact the operational costs. There are some road maintenance things that create some efficiency, some capital repair, things like that. On the operating side, we're really focused on the capital piece. So I would anticipate after the bonds on the ballot, we'll shift that conversation over the next, year or so to talking about the operating side and ongoing revenue. This budget committee recommended several years ago to City Council, and City Council did. They created a Sustainable Services Revenue Task Force. Community members had several different meetings, looked at 13 different revenue options. There's still some options out there that council could take a look at. So I anticipate reviving that conversation.
Good. Member Cohen, did you have any other follow-ups with that, or?
Thank you, Chair. Just one more clarification comment. For ongoing bonds, how does that affect the city's overall bond rating?
Excellent question. I don't think having bonds necessarily impacts your rating. It's other factors, things like fund balance, some things that we have very little control over, like the socioeconomic atmosphere in the community, right? So that's one thing that we've looked at is, we're at AA2, which is pretty good. But that's really our top that we can get to in Salem with where we're at. But fund balance, other factors, the council's ability and willingness to look at new revenue sources like the city operations fee, that helps, as we're looking at our forecasts, strong financial management. But as far as, looking at bonds out there, I think having a strategy helps. This 10-year picture, I think, will help. But just having bonds in general, I don't think it would impact it.
Thank you. Member Source?
Thank you, Chair. My question is about, there's two things that really kind of surprised me when reading the answers that staff put together. One is around the short staff of police and their inability to do crisis intervention training because they don't have the coverage to take officers aside to train them. Can you explain to us what crisis intervention training means? Because it seems very concerning that we don't have coverage to give our officers that training. If I would guess what crisis intervention would mean.
I appreciate the question, and I specifically used that example because it is so impactful. But the idea of training in general has just become more and more challenging, right? Because we can't staff our patrol shifts. You have to pull people off patrol shifts to put them through a day, a week of training. You have to backfill with overtime. People lose their days off. It becomes more and more challenging the more stretched thin you are. And so there's certain minimum requirements for training that we have to do every year, or every 2 years, but for just to maintain our certifications and so forth. So there's this basic level of training that we have to do. Anything we want to layer upon on top of that, which is like the advanced CIT training, crisis intervention training, which is just like the name implies, is to try to de-escalate situations with folks in crisis. It's a 40-hour course. It's a week-long course for officers. We've trained about 20% of our officers so far, and we're trying to put more through every year. But it's a commitment to take officers off the street and put them through a week of extra training. And so I use that example because it's so important for us, and it was recommended in the community policing audit that was completed when I first arrived. That was one of the key recommendations. We've written it into our strategic plan as a specific goal for our organization to accomplish. But I'm worried about not being able to accomplish these goals because of staffing. And so training is a challenge and hindrance in general, but that's one specific example of how extra challenging it is for any sort of training like that that's above and beyond our basic training requirements.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my second question is around, in the notes, you had indicated that roughly about 8% of the applicants who tested with you all were hired. And that shocked me because I have no idea what that means, but it seems super duper low. Can you give us a little more information, or if that's pretty consistent around a standard on percentage of training, and why wouldn't people be able to, like, why would the testing like be a barrier to, hiring? What are they not passing kind of deal?
Yes. And it's not just the testing, it's the background investigation process as well. Okay. And so it's actually fairly standard to have maybe 1 in 10 people successfully complete the entire process. So, if you think about that, you need 100 applicants to hire 10 police officers, right? So when we're only getting 30, 40, 50 applicants at a time right now, it's extremely challenging to keep up with the vacancies that we have. But so that number's not abnormal. And it sounds bad when you first hear it, but it's actually pretty in line with industry standards.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Nordyke.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on Mr. Eggleston's comments about the Sustainable Revenue Committee. Are we going to be hearing more about that in our upcoming budget talks? Because I'm very interested in the revenue side of this equation. I'd like to know what kind of conversations we're going to be having here. If a task force is being put together, I think inquiring minds would like to know. I think we're hearing all about the city expenditures. I would really like to hear more about what we can do from the revenue side of the equation.
I appreciate the question. I think right now, timing is really the issue. We're really focusing on the revenue or the general obligation bond. I would anticipate the general fund forecast that comes back to the budget committee next January could kind of be the launching point for that conversation for this body and any action the city council wants to take. So it'll be, just after we find out if the bond passes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I appreciate that. And to one and all, may the 4th be with you today.
Thank you. Member Anderson.
Thank you. I'm chair of the City Finance Committee, and I can agree with Mr. Eggleston that we have been sort of in a little bit of an hiatus awaiting the bond in November. We've had discussions about various things we could do, and we have proposed in the past, for example, the employee payroll tax, some increased fees, streetlight fees, and some other fees, and business license fees. There are all sorts of, wood shedding we've been doing, just kind of checking things out, but we're holding off until we pass the bond, because that's the crucial thing right now for this city, is to make sure we pass that bond.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions about anything we've talked about today or topics for our meeting next week? Josh, do you know, can you give us an update on what we're going to be handling next week?
Of course. We're going to be looking at the property tax levies for the URA and the city, and then we're going to be looking at the budget as a whole for recommendation to the city council. So if you all need any additional information for that recommendation, that would be a great time to let us know so we can have it ready for you.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, everybody, right? Staff is, of course, open to receive your emails with questions in between now and then. I do see that we have public testimony for future budget issues. Do we have anybody signed up, Josh?
We do not.
Okay. Well, if we do not have any further questions, then we are adjourned for tonight, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
For more videos and for more information, go to capitalcommunitymedia.org and follow us on social media.